Happy Easter. As I've spoken about a few times before, I am a church-going atheist. I don't really believe in a god, not an entity god, not one that like thinks things and feels stuff and wants things. But I do believe in like God, as in like something that's identical with the universe, something that's identical with the world around me, as in I am God, you are God, this is God, that is God, whatever, whatever. So I go to an open-minded church, one that doesn't judge people for the specifics of what they believe. And so it is nominally Christian. It follows the Christian calendar, the Christian narrative. And they know what I believe. They know generally what it is that I do, and they're perfectly all right with it because we're all kind of pulling in the same direction. But the question is, and it's a question I've been asked a number of times, like, why go to a church? Why not just be a secular guy and just have the same values and, not call yourself a Christian or call yourself a secular Christian or whatever else? And the reason for that is that it is an antidote to nihilism. What is nihilism, first of all? Well, nihilism is meaninglessness. It's a lack of a shared understanding of value, a shared understanding of what the world is like. It's basically what has happened since the rational revolution. In the before time, the worldview of the average person was overwhelmingly set by a spiritual narrative, by a mystical narrative. And in the case of like medieval Europe or whatever, that would have been, yes, the Christian church, overwhelmingly the Catholic Church. And then when the Protestant Reformation came along, it became the Protestant Church as well. And this would work to build a reality shaping narrative. And this is a topic I've spoken about before, which you can see the details of in this lengthy video above my head. But the point of that is that it structures a society and structures the people that live in a society such that they've got a shared common worldview, a shared common reality in which to live, a set of protocols and stories that everyone can understand one another with. Even though we might be different people, even though we might not agree on things, we at least have this shared understanding of what the universe looks like, that we can at least find some commonality, find some way to structure a conversation on. When the rational revolution came around, this stopped really having as much effect because people started recognizing that, oh, there are different ways of being, there are different ways of thinking about the world that don't necessarily depend on this common narrative. And that's great for a number of different reasons. It means that you're not oppressed into this specific form of life. It also takes away the overarching power of the religious leaders from being able to dominate. Because if you have a people that believe overwhelmingly in the truth of this specific narrative, and you have somebody with a big fancy hat that says that I speak for this God and I tell you the stories that are true, what is the reality shaping truth, well, it's very easy to manipulate people in that sort of scenario. So when it's now undermined by rationalism, it becomes less possible for people with pointy hats to manipulate large groups of people. That's great. But also it leads to this problem of nihilism, because no longer is this shared common narrative there to shape the reality of a large group of people. And so it becomes very easy to fall away from society at large. It becomes possible to stop seeing that anything matters, stop seeing that it's possible to believe in anything is true at all. If there is no shared yardstick by which to measure meaning, then you can't really have any sort of understanding of what meaning is. What is right? What is truth? What is valuable? What is, what is the ethical, moral thing to do? If there is no standard for that, then what are you supposed to do? Now, there are ways of managing that. Yes, absolutely. I'm not saying that you need a shared common reality and a shared narrative that overrides people's judgment. But it's hard. It requires effort. It requires an investigation on a personal level as to setting your own values, which not everyone wants to do. I spend a lot of time thinking about ethics and morals, but not everyone is as interested in the intricacies of this ethical calculus as I might be, and indeed it is rather unpleasant at times to be so preoccupied with such things. It means that really I can't get a lot done in a day because I'm so busy working out what the right thing to do is. And so these narratives are valuable for that reason, but they're also valuable just to have a common framework for understanding the world. And of course, there's many different narratives to choose from. This is not the only one. And in fact, this relates to what I wanted to talk about next, which is my least favorite Bible verse, John 3:16. You've probably seen, the guy at various sports games with holding up the sign with John 3:16. The verse is basically, "For he so loved the world that he," this being God we're talking about, "gave his only begotten Son that we may be eternally reborn or have everlasting life," or whatever the heck that is. And this is my least favorite Bible verse for a couple of reasons, the main one of which is that it can be interpreted to mean that this is the only path. This is the only way of having divinity. This Jesus guy and this specific form of the Jesus guy religion is the only way, and all the other people are wrong and they're going to hell because they don't have the right way to do it. And also for some other slightly related reasons, in that it puts so much importance on this one guy, Jesus, which he's not important. He's obviously like the central figure of this narrative. But I more enjoy the kind of Christianity that believes that we are all divine. We're all born sons and daughters and gender-neutral children of God. And that to me is the more powerful narrative here, where if we're all divine beings, if we're all children of God, we all have the same power that Jesus has. We have the ability to challenge authority. We have the ability to set our own narratives that override the law-based, the authority-based narratives of the state or of empire or of whatever other oppressive force we're talking about. Because that's really what Jesus was, and that's why I love the Christian narrative, the narrative of the life and stories and times of Jesus, is that he was born into a military dictatorship. He was born into this empire of Rome that was oppressing the people, that undermined everyone's cultures, and unfortunately the culture of the people that he was born into, they were collaborators. They were basically obeying Rome in order to be able to live peaceful lives, which is understandable. But they got in bed with the Roman Empire. And when Jesus came to his ministership, he started recognizing the incredible injustices around him, how corrupt his own church, his own Jewish church had become. And he called out the bullshit. He called out the people that were doing unjust things, that were taking the Lord's name in vain, because that's what that means, basically speaking with God's voice, speaking as if they were talking on God's behalf, and saying things that were selfish in nature, things that supported the power and the domination of the Roman Empire. He called this out, and they killed him for it. They tried to stop the movement that he had started by executing its leader. And the value of the story of Easter is that you can't do that. You can't kill a movement like that, because justice eventually will win. The guy goes into the grave, and some people believe he was bodily risen, and I respect that. You can believe that if you want. I believe that it's more powerful that he is spiritually risen, that he is not just bodily with us, he's within us. He's dissolved into the social sphere that we now inhabit. That the spirit of the dude who spoke up against injustice, that stood up for rules that don't make sense, we can do that too. We have that same power. We have the ability to be Jesus in the world. So that's why I like Christianity. That's why I go to a Christian church. That's why I call myself a secular Christian. Yeah, you can call me a blasphemer. You can call me a heretic, whatever. That's fine. I accept that. I acknowledge and recognize that I don't have the same metaphysics. I don't have the same ontology as your standard Christians. But given Jesus's perspective about people of other religions, that he was overwhelmingly accepting of people with other beliefs, of other faiths, that he hung out with sinners, prostitutes and tax collectors and no-good-uns, and invited women, which was a no-no in those days, to his table to be treated as equals. Given that that was his stance, I think he'd be okay with me. I should hope so, at least. Anyways, I make videos daily, and they're not all about religion, obviously. And so if you enjoy this content, hit the like button, do all those algorithmic things. And so thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.